The emergency lights pulsed an angry red as Dr. Amara Wells fought with the failing controls of her research vessel. The ship groaned around her, metal twisting as it plummeted through the atmosphere of Nixus, a planet that wasn't supposed to be inhabited. Yet here she was, about to make an unplanned landing on its surface after a catastrophic engine failure. Come on," she muttered, pulling back on the controls with all her strength. The ground rushed up to meet her, a sea of bioluminescent forest that might have been beautiful if it wasn't about to become her crash site. Impact alarms screamed through the cockpit as she made one last desperate attempt to level out. The crash felt like being caught in an avalanche. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, and Amara's world turned into a blur of motion and sound. When everything finally stopped spinning, she found herself hanging upside down in her harness, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. She released the buckles with shaking hands and dropped to what used to be the ceiling of her cockpit. The ship's systems were dead, leaving only the eerie glow of the forest filtering through the broken view screen. Amara grabbed her emergency pack and crawled out through a gap in the hull, her boots crunching on scattered debris. The air was thick and warm, heavy with unfamiliar scents. Towering trees stretched toward a purple sky, their trunks laced with veins of shifting blue light. Beautiful, yes, but also completely unknown. Her research had suggested Nixus was uninhabited, suitable for a new research outpost. Clearly, someone's data had been wrong. A low growl echoed through the trees. Amara spun around, her hand going to the standard-issue laser pistol at her hip. Something was moving in the shadows between the trees, something big. Her heart pounded as she backed toward the wreckage of her ship. Another growl, closer this time. And then she saw it. The creature burst from the undergrowth, all muscle and teeth and glowing markings. It was easily twice her size, with 6 powerful limbs and a hide that seemed to shift colors in the forest's light. Amara fired her pistol, but the beam simply scattered across the creature's scales. Remarkable. She couldn't help but whisper even as she prepared to die. Adaptive camouflage and energy-dispersing scales. The beast lunged, and Amara closed her eyes. But the attack never came. Instead, she heard the sound of something heavy hitting something else, followed by a pained screech. Her eyes snapped open to find another figure standing between her and the creature. Humanoid, but definitely not human. Tall, powerful, with iridescent scales and bioluminescent markings that pulsed with intensity. In one fluid motion, the figure drew a blade that hummed with energy and drove the creature back into the forest. When it turned to face her, Amara found herself staring into eyes that glowed like molten gold. The being studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant. "You are far from home, little scientist." Amara blinked in surprise. "You speak English." We learned quickly. The figure moved closer, and Amara noticed the way its markings seemed to pulse in rhythm. "I am Theron. And you?" He paused, tilting his head as he studied her. "You should not be alive." "I'm tougher than I look," Amara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Dr. Amara Wells, cynobiologist. I wasn't aware this planet was inhabited." Theron's markings flickered in what might have been amusement. Clearly. He stepped closer and Amara forced herself not to retreat. "Your scent, it calls to something in me. Something ancient." Warning bells rang in Amara's mind. "What do you mean?" "Among my kind, when we find one who resonates with our essence, it triggers what you might call a bonding instinct." Theron's voice dropped lower. "You have triggered mine." Amara's scientific mind raced to process this information. A bonding instinct, like some form of chemical or pheromonal response. Much more than that. Theron moved with liquid grace, circling her slowly. "It is permanent, unbreakable. And now that it has begun, I cannot let you leave." "That's not how this works," Amara protested, backing away. "I need to contact my research station. They'll be looking for me." "They will not find you." Theron's voice was calm. Certain. You are mine now. The bond demands it. Amara's back hit the wreckage of her ship. I don't belong to anyone. No. Theron reached out, his clawed hand gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then why does your body respond to my presence? Why does your heart race? The bond works both ways, little scientist. And that was the terrifying part. He wasn't entirely wrong. Something about him called to her on a level she couldn't explain, couldn't quantify. It was like gravity, pulling her toward him despite every logical argument against it. This is insane, she whispered. Perhaps. Theron's markings pulsed with what she was beginning to recognize as satisfaction. But it is reality. Your reality now. Welcome to Nixus, Dr. Amara Wells. Welcome home. The first week in Theron's dwelling was a study in contradictions. Amara found herself torn between her scientific fascination with Nixian biology and her instinctive resistance to captivity. The dwelling itself was a marvel, a living structure that seemed to pulse with the same bioluminescent energy that flowed through the forest and Theron himself. The markings on your scales, she asked one evening, unable to contain her curiosity. They respond to your emotions. Theron, who had been sharpening one of his energy blades, looked up with that now familiar gleam of amusement in his golden eyes. They respond to the bond, he corrected. Watch. He moved closer, and Amara noticed how the patterns beneath his scales brightened, creating intricate swirls of light that seemed to reach toward her. Fascinating, she murmured, momentarily forgetting her situation in favor of scientific observation. The intensity varies based on proximity. Among other things, Theron's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. You're beginning to understand. Amara caught herself and stepped back. Understanding something doesn't mean accepting it. I'm still a prisoner here. Are you? Theron gestured to the open entrance of the dwelling. You may leave whenever you wish. The forest beyond is dangerous, yes, but I do not cage you. But you'll follow me. Always. The word carried weight, a promise and a warning wrapped into one. Despite her resistance, Amara found herself adapting. She learned the rhythms of this alien world, how the bioluminescence dimmed during what passed for day, how the air grew thicker with humidity as night approached. She learned that Theron's people, the Nixians, were not numerous but were highly territorial. Most significantly, she learned that the bonding instinct was far more complex than she'd initially assumed. It wasn't just Theron's behavior that confused her, it was her own responses. She found herself tracking his movements, aware of his presence even when he was out of sight. The sound of his voice triggered something warm and inexplicable in her chest. Worst of all, she caught herself seeking his company, drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected wisdom. The bond is not meant to cage, Theron explained one night as they sat beneath the glowing canopy. It is meant to complete. Two beings resonating at frequencies that align perfectly. That's not possible, Amara argued, though her conviction was weakening. We're different species, the biological implications alone. You think too much with this. Theron tapped her forehead gently with one clawed finger. And not enough with this. His hand moved to rest over her heart. The contact sent a surge of warmth through her body, and she watched in fascination as his markings brightened in response. The resonance is physical then, some form of energy transfer. Theron made a sound that might have been laughter. Always the scientist. Yes, there is an energy exchange, but it is more than that. It is. He paused, searching for the right words, a recognition of souls. Souls aren't scientifically proven, Amara pointed out, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. Then prove it. Theron's challenge was soft but clear. Study the bond. Study me. Study yourself, but do not deny what you feel simply because you cannot explain it. And that was the problem. She couldn't explain it. Couldn't explain why his touch calmed her when it should have frightened her. Couldn't explain why she felt safer in his presence than she ever had in the sterile confines of her research station. Couldn't explain why, when he brought her food or draped her in the warm, living fabric that Nixians use for clothing. Something deep inside her responded with satisfaction. One morning, she woke to find him watching her, his markings pulsing slowly in what she'd come to recognize as contentment. "Your resistance is weakening," he observed. Amara sat up, running a hand through her hair. "Is that what your markings tell you?" "No." His lips curved in a slight smile. "That is what tells me." He pointed to her own arm, and she looked down to find her skin glowing faintly with patterns that echoed his own. "That's impossible," she whispered, touching the marks with trembling fingers. "I'm human. We don't." "The bond changes both participants," Theron explained, satisfaction evident in his voice. "You are still human, but you are also becoming something more, something that can exist in both worlds." The implications were staggering. Amara's mind raced with questions, theories, possibilities. But beneath the scientific curiosity, something else stirred. A recognition that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the prison she'd thought it was. "I still need to understand," she said finally. Theron nodded, reaching out to trace one of the glowing patterns on her arm. "Then understand. But do not fight what you already know to be true." And as his markings pulsed in sync with the new patterns on her skin, Amara wondered if perhaps some truths existed beyond the realm of scientific explanation. The attack came without warning. Amara was studying the bioluminescent patterns of local flora when she felt it, a sudden spike of alarm that wasn't her own. Through the bond, she sensed Theron's tension moments before the forest erupted into chaos. They emerged from the shadows like living darkness. Nixians, but different from Theron. Their scales were darker, their markings pulsing with aggressive reds and purples. Leading them was a massive warrior whose presence made Amara's newly developed markings dim instinctively. "Krovak." Theron's voice carried a dangerous edge as he materialized beside her, moving her behind him with fluid grace. "You dare enter my territory." The larger Nixian's markings flashed with challenge. The human female. Her scent carries through the forest. Such a rare prize should not be claimed by a lone warrior. Understanding dawned on Amara. These weren't just rivals. They were hunters, drawn by the unique energy signature of her bond with Theron. She felt his fury through their connection, saw it in the way his markings blazed with protective intensity. "She is mine." Theron's words vibrated with power, bonded and claimed. Krovak's laugh was like grinding stone. "Bonds can be broken. With enough force, anything can be broken." The fight exploded faster than Amara's eyes could track. Theron moved like liquid light, his energy blades singing through the air as he engaged multiple attackers at once. His fighting style was beautiful and lethal, each movement flowing into the next with deadly precision. But they were outnumbered. Through the bond, Amara felt every hit Theron took, every surge of pain and determination. Without conscious thought, she found herself moving, her body responding to instincts she didn't know she possessed. One of Krovak's warriors lunged at her, probably expecting easy prey. Instead, Amara ducked and rolled, her movements synchronized with Theron's, as if they'd fought together for years. She grabbed a fallen energy blade, and to her amazement, it hummed to life in her hands, responding to the same energy that now flowed through her veins. "Impossible," the warrior hissed, just before she struck. The battle became a dance of light and shadow. Amara and Theron moved in perfect harmony, their bond amplifying their awareness of each other. When one attacked, the other defended. When one retreated, the other advanced. Their markings pulsed in sync, creating patterns that seemed to disorient their attackers. Krovak, seeing his advantage slipping, charged directly at Amara. But this time, she didn't need Theron's protection. She met the attack with her own, the energy blade in her hands moving as if guided by centuries of muscle memory that wasn't her own. The bond, she realized aloud, as she parried a strike that should have overwhelmed her. It's not just emotional. It's sharing knowledge, skills, instincts. Through their connection, she felt Theron's fierce pride. Yes, his thoughts echoed in her mind. We are one. The tide turned. Working in perfect synchronization, they drove the attackers back. Krovak, bleeding from several wounds, finally retreated, his markings dim with defeat. "This isn't over," he snarled. "It is," Theron replied, his hand finding Amara's. Their markings blazed together, creating a light so intense that the remaining attackers fell back. "She is not just bonded. She is transformed. Leave, or the next time we meet will be your last." As their enemies melted back into the forest, Amara turned to Theron. "That shouldn't have been possible. The way we fought together, the way I knew exactly what to do. The bond is more than just a claim," Theron explained, his markings still bright with battle energy. "It is an exchange. My skills become yours. Your knowledge becomes mine. We are stronger together than we ever could be apart." Amara looked down at her hands, still glowing with Nixian patterns. "I should be terrified by how much I'm changing, by how natural this feels. But you're not." It wasn't a question. "No," she admitted, finally letting go of her last reservations. "I'm not. When we fought together, when I felt our energies align, it felt right. Like finding a piece of myself I never knew was missing." Theron's markings pulsed with satisfaction and something deeper, an emotion that flowed through their bond with unmistakable clarity. "Now you understand. This was never about possession. It was about completion." As the forest settled around them, Amara realized he was right. The bond hadn't trapped her. It had freed her to become something extraordinary. Something that existed in the space between human and Nixian, between science and instinct, between what she had been and what she could become. "We should prepare," she said finally. "Krovak will return with more warriors." Theron smiled, his markings synchronizing with hers in a display of perfect harmony. "Let them come. They face not two beings, but one force. Together, we are unstoppable." And as their energies merged and flowed, Amara knew that no force in the universe could break what they had become. In the days following the attack, Amara threw herself into understanding Nixian biology with renewed intensity. Her quarters in Theron's dwelling had become a makeshift laboratory, filled with samples and observations recorded on salvaged equipment from her crash. "The energy transfer isn't just superficial," she explained one evening, examining the now permanent luminescent patterns on her skin. "It's literally rewriting aspects of my cellular structure, adapting human biology to handle Nixian energy signatures." Theron watched her work with patient amusement. "You seek to explain with science what our people have known through instinct for generations." "But that's just it." Amara looked up, excitement clear in her eyes. "Your instincts were right. The bond isn't just a cultural practice or a behavioral pattern. It's a sophisticated biological mechanism for sharing and adapting genetic traits between compatible species." Through their connection, she felt Theron's curiosity peak. "You found something. Look at this." She pulled up readings from her partially repaired scanner. "The bioluminescent patterns we share. They're not just decorative. They're a visible manifestation of quantum entanglement at a cellular level. Our bodies are literally synchronizing on a quantum scale. Which explains why we can share thoughts, skills, and energy." Theron mused, his markings pulsing thoughtfully. "Exactly. And it's not just us. The entire ecosystem of Nixis operates on similar principles. The trees, the animals, even the living structures you build. Everything is connected through these quantum energy networks." Their discussion was interrupted by a distant rumble. Both turned toward the sound, their markings immediately shifting to alert patterns. Through their bond, they shared the same realization: ships entering the atmosphere. "They're coming." Theron's voice was grim. "Krovak has brought reinforcements." But Amara's attention was caught by something else in the scanner readings. "No, those aren't Nixian ships. Those are human vessels. Research Station 7 must have picked up my emergency beacon." The implications hit them both simultaneously. Rescue meant choice. Choice meant potential separation. The thought sent a spike of distress through their bond so intense that both of them flinched. "You cannot leave," Theron stated, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice that she'd never heard before. "The bond," Amara began. "Will kill us both if broken," he finished. "But you already knew that, didn't you? Your research confirmed what I told you from the beginning." She nodded slowly. "The quantum entanglement between our cells is too complete. Attempting to break it would cause catastrophic biological failure in both of us." "But Theron," she met his gaze, "that's not why I want to stay." His markings brightened with hope. No. I want to stay because what we've discovered here, this bond, this connection, it's revolutionary. The potential applications for human-Nixian cooperation are endless. Medical breakthroughs, technological advancements, new forms of communication and understanding. "You speak of science again," Theron said softly, moving closer. "I speak of bridges," Amara corrected, reaching for his hand and watching their markings synchronize. "Between species, between worlds, between ways of understanding the universe. What we have, it's proof that humanity and Nixians can do more than just coexist. We can evolve together." The sound of ships grew closer. Soon, they would have to face the approaching humans and explain something that defied conventional scientific understanding. But as Amara stood there, feeling Theron's strength and certainty flowing through their bond, she knew they would face it together. "They will not understand easily," Theron warned. Amara smiled, letting her newfound confidence flow through their connection. "Then we'll help them understand. After all, I'm living proof that the impossible is possible. And maybe, just maybe, we're the first step towards something greater than either of our species imagined." As if in response to her words, their markings blazed with shared purpose, illuminating the dwelling with patterns that spoke of unity, strength, and the unlimited potential of two worlds becoming one. The research team's initial reaction to finding their missing xenobiologist, transformed by alien biology, was exactly what Amara had expected, a mixture of horror, fascination, and desperate attempts to rescue her from what they perceived as a hostile situation. Dr. Wells, Dr. Harrison, the team leader, spoke carefully as if addressing someone who had lost their mind. "Whatever this creature has done to you, we can fix it. Our medical facilities can't fix what isn't broken," Amara interrupted, standing firmly beside Theron. Their markings pulsed in perfect synchronization, a visible demonstration of their connection. "What's happened to me isn't an infection or a contamination. It's an evolution." The research team's security detail kept their weapons trained on Theron, who remained unnaturally still, his presence a steady anchor through their bond. Amara could feel his restraint, his willingness to endure their fear and suspicion for her sake. "Look at these readings," she continued, sending her research data to their tablets. "The quantum entanglement patterns, the cellular adaptations, the energy transfer mechanisms. This isn't just first contact anymore. This is proof that humans and Nixians can achieve something unprecedented." Dr. Harrison frowned at the data. "These readings, they're extraordinary. But Amara, you can't seriously be considering staying here. Your work, your life." "My work is here now," she said firmly. "What Theron and I have discovered could revolutionize our understanding of biology, consciousness, even quantum physics. But more than that," she took Theron's hand, feeling their energies merge. "We found a way for two species to truly understand each other, not through words or treaties, but through direct experience." As if on cue, the forest around them came alive with light. Dozens of Nixians emerged from the trees, their markings creating a spectacular display of synchronized patterns. Among them was Krovek, but his posture was different now, respectful, almost reverent. "We have witnessed their bond," Krovak announced, his voice carrying to the startled humans. "It is true and deep. The human female is no prisoner. She is transformed, elevated. Through her, our peoples can find a new way forward." The security team shifted nervously, but Dr. Harrison's scientific curiosity was clearly piqued. "You're suggesting some kind of diplomatic scientific exchange." "I'm suggesting a revolution," Amara said, letting her markings brighten with purpose. "Imagine a future where humans and Nixians can share not just knowledge, but experience, where we can learn from each other on the deepest possible level." Through their bond, Theron added his own thoughts, which Amara voiced. "The bond Theron and I share is just the beginning. We've proven it's possible. Now we can work to understand it, refine it, maybe even find ways to create more controlled versions of it for diplomatic and scientific purposes." The tension in the clearing slowly began to ease as the implications sank in. The security team lowered their weapons. The scientists started asking questions. The Nixians moved closer, their markings creating patterns of welcome and possibility. "It won't be easy," Dr. Harrison warned. "The bureaucrats back on Earth will have a field day with this." Amara smiled, feeling Theron's quiet confidence flowing through their bond. "Nothing worthwhile ever is. But look around you. We're standing on the brink of something amazing. Two species, finding a way to bridge the gap between them. Isn't that worth fighting for?" As if in answer, the forest itself seemed to pulse with light, the quantum energy networks that connected all life on Nixus responding to the harmony between human and Nixian. It was beautiful, profound, and utterly unprecedented. "We are stronger together," Theron spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Not just Amara and I, but all of us. This is the way forward." The choice that had seemed so daunting now felt inevitable. Amara looked at her fellow humans, seeing the moment when understanding began to dawn in their eyes. She was no longer just Dr. Amara Wells, xenobiologist. She had become something new, something that represented the potential of both species. "I'm staying," she announced, though everyone present already knew it, not as a captive or an experiment, but as a bridge. The first of many, I hope. The final threads of resistance dissolved. As humans and Nixians began tentative interactions, their fears giving way to curiosity, Amara felt Theron's satisfaction through their bond. "You've changed everything," he murmured. "We've changed everything," she corrected, watching as her two worlds began to merge. "And this is just the beginning." Their markings blazed together, creating patterns that spoke of future possibilities, of barriers broken, and new paths forged. In that moment, surrounded by the light of understanding between two species, Amara knew that what had started as a crash landing had become something far more significant, the first step toward a future where the boundaries between human and alien, between science and instinct, between separate and united, would never be the same again.